We do welcome you in. It is another KMOX Sports Roundtable along with Bernie Miklasz and Kevin Wheeler. My name's Matt Pauley. We are so happy that you've chosen to join us here on the program. We've got a lot to get to today and this week. Fellas, good to see you guys. How are you?
Great, dude. It's great. I mean, come on. The playoffs are going. The NFL has been fun, and Jerry Jones got his ass kicked yesterday, and then college football has been amazing, man. How can we not like this?
Let me just say I second that emotion. Yeah, outstanding stuff right there. So, yeah, Matt, thanks for having me and having us together, and we wish our friend Tom Ackerman well. He's not. Yes. He's been feeling under the weather and getting worse. So, go get some medications, Aki.
The chest congestion that's going around. I had it last week. Went to the urgent care, so maybe I passed it along to him via the sports office at KMOX. But if I did that, my apologies. Let's start talking playoff baseball, and obviously we want to connect to the Cardinals. This is true for every team because players move around. But when you're the Cardinals and you have not had postseason success and you have not been in the playoffs for a couple years, it becomes very pronounced when former Cardinals are doing things in the playoffs.
Yeah, I get it, and that's one of the real drawbacks and negatives of the Cardinals not being in the postseason. We in the media and we as fans totally obsess over every single Cardinal that is even getting as much as pitching 1/3 of an inning or getting one at bat in the postseason. And, let me get a couple things off my chest. It's like, all of a sudden, if you read social media or whatever, and even some of the emails I get, all of a sudden Lane Thomas is Joe DiMaggio. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually did a statistical dive on it. There's no need to bore people with that, but let's just calm down. All right. In fact, when they traded him to the Guardians, when the Nationals traded him to the Guardians, he hit 209 and struck out 35% of the time. But he's having a great postseason, tip of the cap. He's a good dude. But the time the Cardinals traded him for John Lester, they were desperate for starting pitching, and Lane Thomas was hitting 104. And that's the summer, if you remember, where Bader and Carlson and O'Neill were all fantastic. So there was no reason to think they wouldn't move forward as their starting outfielders. Lane Thomas was expendable at the time, but people are trying to rewrite history. And I don't know. That kind of thing just irritates me. John Lester did a darn good job for the Cardinals. His final 10 starts, his ERA was 3.40, and they won 7 out of the 10 starts. He was excellent down the stretch and filled a glaring need. The other one, and I'm going to bail out after this in terms of just talking too long. I'll turn it over to Wheels. Let me just put it this way. In terms of Jack Flaherty, listen, he was great in game one last night. Just absolutely great. And he's had a really good, strong season. I'm not trying to argue against that. But all of a sudden, I'm hearing these people talking about, the Cardinals screwed up again. There wasn't one person who follows the Cardinals who said, trading him to the Orioles, a huge mistake. They'll regret that forever. It's like with Flaherty, he had one injury after another. He had after, from 20 through 23, his stats were incredibly mediocre. They traded him to the Orioles, and the Orioles booted him out of the rotation after he had a 7.11 ERA in his first 7 starts there. They kicked him to the bullpen. So I will say this, anybody who is now claiming at the time, they said, that's a mistake to give up on Jack Flaherty. All due respect, I want you to submit to a polygraph, okay?
Well, and Wheels.
Shut up. I'm sorry, man.
To Bernie's point, he was terrible with Baltimore last year. The team that deserves the credit here is Detroit. They were able to unlock Flaherty and get him back to what we saw from him early on in his Cardinals tenure.
Yeah, I mean, with Flaherty, the problem wasn't that they dealt him. It was that they weren't able to do what Detroit did, which was get him right? Get him into the lab, get some things working so they can make him better. One of the things that Detroit's done really well, and this is where we talk about the Cardinals needing to make up ground, is their assistant pitching coach is a biomechanical engineer. He's not a pitching coach. He's not a guy that's out there doing strategy. He knows how the body's supposed to move, and that's what they talk about a lot. That's his job. They have a main pitching coach named Chris Fetter who does a lot with tunneling and pitching strategy and mechanics and all that. But Robin Lund is the guy's name. His job is to teach these guys how to move down the mound correctly, and that's where Flaherty picked up 3-4 miles an hour on his fastball. Remember last year he got mad because, I think he got mad at either Jimmy Hayes or Derek Gould because they were noting that his fastball was only 91. And he's like, well, it's the art of pitching. Yeah, well, your art of pitching is now you throwing 96. Something changed. Something changed, and it's a physical thing. And I think that's the stuff that we should be able to look at and say, this is where we're learning from playoff teams what the Cardinals can be better at. Not a guy that would have been their fourth or fifth outfielder for a couple of years. Not Tommy Edman having a few good plays here and there for the Dodgers. Tommy, you have 4 Tommy Edmans. You have those guys in spades all over the organization. Good baseball guys who can do a lot of things, but have their limitations. Like Tommy's limitation is he doesn't hit right-handers, which is kind of tough when you're a switch hitter. So, we don't need to retroactively grade roster moves or roster decisions. And by the way, I think Eric Fetty's probably a better guy to have going into next year than Tommy Edman. Nothing against Edman, good player, but you have other guys that can do that job. You didn't have another Eric Fetty who can come in and be a stable rotation piece. So what we need to learn from these teams isn't how much the Dodgers and Yankees spent, and it isn't retroactively grading moves. It's why do the Indians find ability to get pitchers out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they throw 100 and nobody can hit him, like Cade Smith. Before this year, who's Cade Smith? They helped make these guys. Detroit did that. The Dodgers do that to a degree, but they also spend big too. So those are the lessons to me.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out real quick. I'm sorry, Matt, real quick, because I'm so glad you mentioned that, because you don't criticize the Cardinals for trading Jack Flaherty.
Right.
You question the approach and the fact that they couldn't fix him. They couldn't give him what he needed to become a better pitcher. Now, that's a valid criticism, and I'm glad you brought that up. But that's a separate issue.
Yes.
The idea of you don't trade him. Well, you're going to sign him to a free agent deal?
Right.
Really? I don't think so. With the same people that didn't know how to fix him before. And actually, Dusty Blake's done a really good job, but that was one he has. Yeah, Derek Gould had a great story in the Post-Dispatch today about how they made some pitchers better.
Yeah.
But you're right. It just shows how far behind the times the Cardinals were in terms of really advanced stuff to try to diagnose and fix pitchers.
Yeah, and you made the point, Bernie, and it's important to note that too, that for several years before, Flaherty had been battling injuries. The shoulder problems, and he was healthy this year. So we can't always grade these moves based on what it looks like a year or two later, because the situation at the time was different.
Kevin, to your point about learning from these teams and looking past payroll, and payroll matters. You've got 3 of the 4 teams have very high payrolls. They're spending money, but you look at all 4 of those organizations that are still alive in the playoffs, and they all develop. They all have the infrastructure. They all have the technology that you need. I think the Mets are a great example because they spent all the money in the world. They spent it in really kind of dumb ways. They bring in a guy like David Stearns, who built up the current version of the Brewers. It's not a coincidence that all of a sudden some of these small moves, that it felt like this was a transitional year into whatever David Stearns was going to turn the Mets into. And he's such a smart baseball guy that a transitional year turned into a really good year because they're doing smart baseball things. And that's got to be the message to the Cardinals. Start doing smart baseball things.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And the other thing too, when there was at least a question of whether Ollie Marmol would return in 2025, and we know that he is returning, I just want to throw this in. But I know on my YouTube channel, comments were just pouring in all the time. Well, whatever the Cardinals do, if they're going to replace Marmol, no more of these first-time managers. You need someone. You need someone with a proven track record.
Yeah.
Let's see. So the American League Championships here, you have Stephen Vogt.
Yeah.
The Guardians, who's phenomenal. It's done a phenomenal job, and his experience was a longtime major league catcher, and he was a bullpen coach for 1 year. He never managed anywhere. Nope. He's done an exceptional job. Mendoza, the Mets manager, same thing. He's done an incredible job. He had never managed before.
Aaron Boone had never managed before getting the job.
Dave Roberts never managed
Yep.
before.
Yep.
All four guys in this were first-time managers with no previous major league experience. My point is, you can learn something from that too, which is don't go thinking you need to have a big name or some war horse who's been managing for 15 years, and Terry Francona is the exception, but he's gone. And so it's irrelevant. If you're smart and you know what you're doing and you can identify really, really incredible potential, managerial potential in a guy that hasn't done it at the big leagues before, if you're smart enough to identify that guy, you can find a great manager who had no previous experience. In other words, don't rule anything out just because you didn't like Matheny or you didn't like Marmol. Well, Cardinals fans sure like Mike Schilt now. They really love Mike Schilt now. And I believe he was a first-time big league manager with the Cardinals.
When it comes to like the old school managers, because you mentioned Terry Francona game back in the game when Dusty Baker was managing, obviously when right now we see with Bruce Bochy, we hear Cardinals fans bring up those names a lot. One of the things that at times irks me, the reason those guys are so successful, it's not because they know X's and O's. It's not because they're going out and teaching something. They relate to guys. They communicate with guys. They're great leaders. They do all these things. So the old school managers that continue to exist in baseball, they exist because of their ability to relate, not because of their ability to manage a game.
And they've adapted too. They're willing to adapt. Francona is a great example of that. And he's old school, man. See, I like guys who do both. He's old school. It's tremendously old school, Terry Francona, but he wants the information that the new stuff provides, and he's going to put it to good use. And he's going to work in conjunction with the front office instead of resenting them handing him information. That's the kind of manager you want. If you can get the best of both worlds, that's ideal. Those guys are not easy to find, however.
Yeah. And look, the bottom line is this: you can have the best managers in the world. If you don't have the players, you don't win. I don't care. Right. You will not name a manager of any kind who has had success and win. I'm talking about winning at the playoff level, winning in the World Series without talent. Earl Weaver had it. Your guy, Bernie. Sparky Anderson had it. My guy, Tony La Russa had it. Whitey Herzog had it. It's the players, not the manager. And that's where the Cardinals need to improve. I don't know what Ollie is, but I think that's kind of the point. It's too early to know. And he hasn't had the balanced full roster that he's needed yet to do it. So, we'll see how it plays.
He's my favorite stat I've come up with recently. Ollie Marmol's winning percentage after his first 3 seasons was higher than Tony La Russa's winning percentage in his first 3 seasons in St. Louis. Now, La Russa did get the Cardinals to the playoffs in '96, and they made a run. Yep. But I mean, again, everybody wants to just pound the gavel and case closed, right. Guilty, just give it some time. I don't know how long Marmol will be the Cardinals manager. Chaim Bloom will determine that because he'll be the guy that has the privilege of making a change if he wants after next season. Anyway, thank you.
Along with Bernie Miklasz and Kevin Wheeler, this is a KMOX Sports Roundtable. Guys,
you're Matt Pauley.
I am Matt Pauley. Thank you. As we do watch the postseason continue, and there's been a lot in the media about just lamenting not having October baseball in St. Louis. Wheels, you and I have talked about it. It is, you watch these games, there's a different noise to it. Yeah. If you're ever at the ballpark, there's a different smell to it. Adam Wainwright's had said some things this past week on Foul Territory about how much of a rebuild Cardinals fans would have a stomach for. Again, we don't know how long it's going to take to really get this engine back moving once again, but I think everybody can agree it'll be good when October baseball is happening in St. Louis once again.
Yeah, and look, the different direction, and Bernie, I think we talked about this on DGS last week. Going in a different direction doesn't mean you're not going to be able to make the playoffs next year. The Mets went in a different direction from 2023 to 2024. They reduced their payroll, as Matt, as you pointed out, they brought in David Stearns. They started doing things with a little bit more of a smart plan than just, the owner coming in and laying the hammer down. I want DeGrom and I want Scherzer. They stopped doing that and they started playing ball, but they cut back. They lowered their payroll. They did things that we're hearing about the Cardinals. That doesn't mean you're done, but it does mean you have to make sure that you're doing things the right way. And to get back to this, which is where you have the excitement that builds generational fan bases, where you, by the way, generate more revenue. It's more profitable to make the playoffs than it is to miss, because the playoffs where you make a lot of money at the gate and at the ballpark and all that.
Yeah, and it's you're so right about that. And also you look at some of the Mets breakout stars, and they're guys who came up through the system, which is another lesson, that we and I'll throw the Dodgers in there in this regard. Yeah, they have the I'm exaggerating on purpose. They have the $2 billion payroll. We all know that. and that affords them the luxury of being able to cover their mistakes. Because there's all, it's like
that's right.
They can tolerate like a bunch of mistakes and still be good. But the part about the Dodgers that people do not talk about enough is that they're also incredible in terms of drafting and player development and international signings. Yeah. So they haven't always spent their money wisely. I think Andrew Friedman is brilliant, but the Dodgers have, in fact, made a lot of mistakes.
Yep.
But they always have this treasure trove of rising young talent in their system, even though they're drafting late in the first round every year.
Yep. They still have that right now, by the way.
Yeah, Friedman, coming from the Tampa Bay model, the Dodgers have the big war chest, yes, but they're also outperforming teams that draft earlier than them and earlier more often than them. So he's beating them he's beating these small market teams at their game, even though he's got this financial empire in LA. And it still comes down to drafting and developing your own players and to have a steady, outstanding supply of good talent on the way to the majors.
Yeah. And I'll throw this to you guys. The Dodgers and the Yankees have outspent Major League Baseball by a long shot. In the last 15 years, how many World Series does each of those teams have?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
One each. And one was in a short season.
Yeah. Right.
So, that's kind of the point. You don't need to be that. You don't need to be that to be a World Series team. And while they have the luxury of doing it, and by the way, if you had their revenues, you'd be crazy not to do it. Because as you point out, Bernie, the Dodgers are in the NLCS with 7 pitchers on the injured list, 7 starting pitchers, all of them talented, right? All of these are top of the level guys, and they're all out. Tyler Glasnow is out. Clayton Kershaw is out. I mean, these are big time dudes, and yet they're still here because they have that luxury. Other teams don't, but they've outspent baseball for 20 years. The Yankees have outspent baseball for 20 years, and it doesn't mean you're going to win. You got to be smart.
Exactly.
Well,
the Guardians are incredible proof of that concept.
Yeah.
Look at how well they have a system that's constantly funneling players to the majors. Go ahead, Matt.
I feel like the Dodgers deserve credit for taking care of the roster 1 through 26 as well, because a lot of times these big money teams, they go spend at the top and they feel like that's going to be enough. And if you do that and you lose 7 starting pitchers, you're going to be in trouble. Well, now the Dodgers are able to run out a bullpen game and still have a legit chance of winning, and they've been doing that in the postseason. It's because they took care of all 26 spots on the roster beyond. And again, that goes back to player development, because good, healthy teams fill out the back end of their roster with guys coming up from the minor league system.
Yeah, and they use some of those guys to trade for stars when they get to that point. That you have to be. They have to get credit for what they're doing. Now, again, when you have big revenue, it's not that hard to say, here's another 10 million. We can put that towards our facility in the Dominican or whatever. The Dodgers are what now, $750, $800 million a year in revenue. I mean, that's crazy. It's like 2.5 times what the Cardinals are. Maybe not 2.5, but it's 2 times for sure.
It's huge.
And the Yankees are the Dodgers. Oh, actually, I think that's actually just the Dodgers local TV. I think their local TV is $700 million. Just that, nothing else. So yeah, they have that wiggle room, and we're learning a little bit about it. But as we've seen since the opening up of the playoffs to larger wild card rounds, that's great. That'll probably guarantee you a spot in the playoffs, but it doesn't mean you're going to win when you get there. Most years, these teams are just as likely to go down as anybody else.
And the Padres, by the way, cut payroll going into this year.
Big time, like
in
80
fact,
million, yeah.
In fact, the 26-man payroll this year, 26-man payroll, the Cardinals had a higher payroll than the Padres. So explain that to me then.
Yeah, it's not payroll.
Granted, the Padres have had a heck of a nucleus, but they've also let some really big name players walk or traded them or whatever. So, I mean, Yeah, it's not just counting dollars. Everybody wants to reduce it to how big's your payroll size, and I'm like so over that. I'm not saying the Cardinals should have this like real low payroll,
No,
not at
no,
all.
no.
But here I go again. But people are acting like what's going to be happening with Hein Bloom is like some new thing, and it's because Bill DeWitt Jr. is cheap. No, Bill DeWitt Jr. is getting back to what he did with Jeff Luhnow. And if you go look at the Cardinals payrolls the whole time that Luhnow was doing his thing, drafting, scouting, international operations, player development, the Cardinals, I think maybe one time they had a top 10 payroll. The two World Series teams that they had that won the thing, each of those teams ranked 11th in payroll. So it's, but the key is that Bill DeWitt because he saved money on the front end with all the homegrown talent coming through, he was able to supplement his roster by going out and making bigger moves that added payroll. It also kind of helps to have Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina all that time too, as well. That just a little bonus there. So anyway.
Yeah.
That's Bernie Miklasz. That's Kevin Wheeler. I'm Matt Pauley. This is a KMOX Sports Roundtable. As we do continue, we'll talk a little hockey for just a moment. Pretty good start for the Blues. They win 2 of their first 3 games out west. They each game they showed some character. They're down 2-0 against Seattle. They score 3 goals in a minute 55, and then they hold a 1-goal lead for the entire third period on the road against Seattle. Then in San Jose, they're down by 3 goals in the third period. They're able to get back within 1. They get the goalie off the ice. They get the goal with the extra attacker, force overtime, and win. Even against Vegas, they found themselves down 2 goals twice. They get back within 1 twice, but don't find the equalizer. I think we can all agree we'd like the Blues not to put themselves into holes every night, but at least in a very small sample size, we're seeing good character and good resiliency from this club.
Go ahead, Wills.
Well, I think what's fascinating is, keeping in mind too that, right out of the gate, it's early enough where we don't know a ton about the way this roster is going to play out as they go, right? San Jose is one of the worst teams in the league. Vegas probably still one of the better teams at the top. So to me, I don't want to judge wins and losses here. I think the bigger point for this team moving forward is they're going to have great goaltending because they're going to be inconsistent on the blue line. That was a problem last year. I don't see anything that changed that going into this year. And somehow, some way, the younger players, and I don't mean kids, they're not kids anymore. Kyra's been around enough. Thomas has been around enough, but they have to continue to ascend. If they stay where they are, that's fine. They're good players, man. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not going to elevate the team. The team is going to need those guys and maybe a couple of others. Maybe you get a couple of the younger kids who start off on the third line or maybe working their way back and forth between the AHL and the NHL. But somehow, some way, the roster overall needs to get better. They got bigger. They got a little faster. That's great, and I'm hoping that works out. I loved the move, stealing the guys from Edmonton as restricted free agents. I thought that was a creative way to add young talent to your team. But I think there's a cap on how good this team can be until a few more players elevate.
Yeah, I agree. They are faster. They are younger. They are fresher. They have more depth than the previous 2 seasons. And I think they're going to have a good year, but I just think the Western Conference is so ridiculous in terms of being great. It's really good. It's going to be tough for them to crack a playoff spot, but you can't rule it out. I really love what we've seen from Broberg, the defenseman they got in the Edmonton offer sheet, Holloway, the young center they got, and with the offer sheet. I really like Pavel Buchnevich getting out of the gate quick, scoring, and they use him at center, but they're also using him at wing. He really looks good. Kairu's scoring. Thomas looks good. As I mentioned, I like those new guys. Look, Binnington's terrific again, showing that last year wasn't just some kind of aberration. This is who he really is because he was phenomenal last year. There's a couple things I don't like, and I don't mean to start picking on players already, but let's be honest here. Braden Chen on the ice, and I know plus minus is not the end all be all, but they're -4 with him on the ice. And he was a liability defensively last season. He's a great guy. He's a great captain, leader, all that. But his scoring has, deteriorated, and defensively he's kind of a liability. And I'm sorry, Nick Leddy. I'm sorry. That's all I'll say. It's just I don't know why they continue to seem to think that they can keep sending him out and they're going to get like some really good performance. I mean, he was awful last year and he's not off to a good start this year, but it's early. See, I'm diplomatic, but it's early.
It is. I mean, look, I know you mentioned it earlier, Bernie, with the Cardinals fans that they like to react instantly. Oh, Tommy Edman got a hit. Must have been a terrible trade. We do a lot of that with early season results.
Sure.
And in in the NFL or in college football, it matters a little bit more because you have fewer games, so it's a bigger part of your year. But in hockey, basketball, baseball, the first few games are just the first few games, and we're just starting to learn about these guys. And, when you look around, though, you talk to and you read some of the top NHL guys out there, everybody's kind of got the Blues on the borderline, probably just outside the playoffs, maybe just inside. But that seems to be the national view, and it happens to be the one I share. I don't think it's impossible for them to get a lot better, but it's about individual players. It's about Jordan Kyrou being a better all-around player, right? Not just a scorer, not just an offensive threat, but being a good all-around player. I have no problems with Thomas. I think he's phenomenal. But if he found another level and ascended a little bit, that would bring the team with it. Maybe he can't. He's an all-star caliber player now. That's not to say that that's not good enough. It's absolutely he's a great player. He earns his money. But for this team to go further than we think, it's going to be about these guys, the top guys, raising their level just as much as it is about the guys at the bottom end of the roster, the bottom end of the lineup, doing more than they've done in the past.
And I want to sneak one more in here real quick because I forgot to mention that they have a really strong fourth line. And that's a measure of how their depth has improved.
WTF.
Yeah, and you got to love that name, right? Seriously,
it's great.
Yeah. It's one of the best line names I think I've ever heard in the NHL.
Yeah,
WTF, baby.
It's got a little bit of everything, right? You got a veteran presence. You got some size. You got some grit. Love it. You got an Australian.
We got an Australian. You always need one of those. When they made the decision to bring Drew Bannister back, I wasn't sold on that decision in the moment. I didn't see a lot from this team after they played a little bit better, but it wasn't this big difference sort of thing. But you mentioned early, Bernie, what they're doing coming off PKs, if they're struggling offensively and they've got an offensive zone face-off where they're bringing Buchnevich up off the second line and pairing him with Thomas and Kyrou just to get those single moments. Like that's somewhat outside of the box thinking. That's being creative. That's trying to create some more offensive opportunities. When he starts doing things like that, I like it. Like I think coaches can push issues like that.
Yeah, I like. It's hard to explain. I had mixed feelings about it, but I think whether they should have pursued someone else, and I think they probably would have had the right guy been available. Say Jim Montgomery, for example. But there was I had no problem with them turning to Bannister and giving him the job because, again, some people they were eyeing up probably were out of reach, so to speak. And so Bannister did enough to deserve at least a longer look. And, after he took over, Berube was fired December the 12th. I think Bannister's first game was December 14th. I mean, they had the 12th best points percentage in the league, and their power play got a little better. The offense was still kind of up and down, but I think there was at least nominal improvement, and they definitely tightened things up on the defensive end, although a lot of that had to do with Hofer and Binnington. So, but I think the roster they have now is a good fit for what Bannister wants to do, wants to play faster. I think he's more of a speed-oriented coach. And listen, Craig Berube, all-time St. Louis legend. I mean, love that man. Always will. But, it's the heavy hockey, and that's fine. They won a Stanley Cup with that. Yep. But I think the Blues sort of fell behind a little bit on the speed curve. I think they did need to get faster because the league in whole is playing much faster.
Like when I watch Colorado, I go, the Blues can't keep up with a team like that. I mean, it's just such a different, and that's just the first team that jumps out at me. They're a pretty fast team. There are so many teams like that, and that was more of a thought last year. I'll be very interested to see what the Blues look like. And the Blues actually had some success against Colorado last year, but just the optics of the game, it looked like they couldn't keep up.
Yeah, I agree totally.
And they have more star level players too.
Yeah. Like Wheel said, there's definitely still a gap. The Blues closed it a bit last year. 92 points is really a fine season. It's second year of a rebuild.
Yeah.
But I don't know. To something Kevin Wheeler said at the top of this particular conversation, I'm not sure what their ceiling is. I don't know yet, and it's going to take time for us to all get a better sense of that.
If they sneak into the playoffs, I don't think anybody's complaining.
No,
That's
that'd be
right.
great.
Yeah.
That'd be a good season.
So the ceiling for me is somewhere around there. This is a KMOX Sports Roundtable along with Bernie Miklasz and Kevin Wheeler. My name is Matt Pauley. As we get into our final part of the conversation, the college football weekend featured Missouri winning a game that they were supposed to win and Illinois finding a way to win a game that they were supposed to win as well. Two teams in two different spots and some other stuff going on nationally in college football as well. Let's start with Missouri. For me, they had to win that game. Obviously, they had to win it in one-sided fashion, but coming off the loss against Texas A&M and some unimpressive performances, even in some wins against Vanderbilt, which maybe that looks a little better now considering what Vanderbilt's done the last 2 weeks against Boston College in those first two games. To me, it felt like we didn't actually learn anything about Missouri this weekend.
Well, the one thing, and I'm going to be kind of harsh here, but I think it's true. I'm not trying to do the hot take thing. I'm really not. But you have an SEC team playing UMass on the road, which if you're Greg Sankey, don't you go to Mizzou and say, look, this is an embarrassment to our conference. We'll buy that game out if you don't want to spend the money. What in the heck were they doing there? And I know the whole backstory. I get all that, but I'm still going to say, what the heck were they doing there? I mean, it's beneath the SEC level. It's okay to play, patsy teams when they're in your building, but you don't go to their building, especially.
Yeah.
There's no college football atmosphere whatsoever. 17,000 announced. It was more like 10 or 12. But my only takeaway, because I didn't care about this game whatsoever. I watched 3 plays. My only takeaway, no, I'm serious. There were that South Carolina, Alabama game.
3 more than I watched. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that South Carolina, Alabama game was on the same time. And that was an outstanding game.
Yeah.
But the only takeaway for me is that Brady Cook sailed to pass high. Luther Burden went up to try to get it. He was vulnerable. He got absolutely nailed, and he left and went into the tent. And there's something going on with his left arm. As we record this, just for people watching, I don't know when you're all going to watch it. At this point, we don't know what Luther Burden's status is or how serious or not serious the injury was. But if they're going to miss Luther Burden for any time, again, if I'm not being a pessimist, but just the idea that that's what you take out of the UMass game. You get your best player hurt.
Yeah.
If it happens in an SEC game, hey man, that's life. You're in the SEC. It's a physical, nasty league, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I already had a sour attitude about that game, but after Burden went out with that, whatever that injury is, I was even a little more salty after that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. To me, Illinois had the much better weekend. They didn't play great, by the way. They blew a big lead to a bad team. Purdue's not that good.
And Purdue's on their second quarterback too.
Yeah.
Right.
So don't get me wrong. I don't want to paint this out to be like some major success, but after it all went wrong, they still found a way to finish. I'm not sure I would have gone for 2 there like Purdue did. To go for the win on the last play. I think I might have taken my chances with overtime and given myself a little bit more of an opportunity. If I had, Oregon's offense or Ohio State's offense, maybe I do that, but Purdue doesn't have that. Like Matt pointed out, they're on their backup quarterback. You've had a bad year. I think maybe you continue the game. But I thought that, Illinois at the very least is showing some competitiveness when they haven't for a long time. And It's not just this game. I think throughout this year, you've seen a little bit better version of them. I'm not sure they're going to finish the year in the top 25, which is where they are now. But at least you've seen something that shows you that they can be competitive in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I didn't like the way
are tough.
Yep.
Yeah, who are they? Who they have, Matt?
I believe it's Michigan and Oregon, if I've got that right.
Well,
Yeah. And Michigan's
winnable.
Yeah,
but then after that, it's a bunch of teams that they can. So they could, if let's say they find a way to beat Michigan, they lose to Oregon, all of a sudden you're talking about a 2-loss Illinois team. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're likely to lose these next 2 games.
Michigan, yeah.
But that's a fantastic season for Brett Bielema if something like that happens. Now, they could easily stumble on the road against one of those Final Four opponents as well. But it's funny when we talk about a potential 10-2 Illinois season. It's fantastic when we compare that to Missouri. Oklahoma fell out of the top 25 by getting run off the field by Texas this past weekend. So now for Missouri, their only game left against a top 25 team is Alabama. They're likely not to win that game. So even if they win every other game, finish 10-2, but they've got a blowout loss to Texas A&M and don't have another win against a top 25 team, I don't know if that's enough to get them in the college football playoff.
That's a great point. And I'm still not sure I'm going to use this word again. I'm not sure what the ceiling is for Mizzou football. And I don't want to blame everything on the quarterback because that's easy to do. But the fact is, they have a lot of weapons on offense, and Brady Cook has got to play better. He just absolutely has to play better. Just the way he hung Burden out the other day at UMass. There I go again. I mean, that's just kind of a microcosm of what is so frustrating about him, even though we're all rooting for him, So listen, they had some players hurt in that game, and on the defensive side, some young guys really stepped up. That was good. That was one good thing that came out of it that I should mention. I hope that Batoon, the defensive coordinator, I hope he gets a lot more aggressive in these SEC games, releasing the hounds, sending more guys on the pass rush, things like that. But I think they got the makings of a good defense, but boy, I'd like to see that passing game just smooth out and just become a lot more consistent and hit more big plays downfield. And again, I don't care what the stats were against UMass. It doesn't matter. No. I'm talking about SEC or Power Four conference status, those kind of opponents.
Yeah. I want to go on a little bit bigger picture rant on college football because I'll see if you guys agree with me. I'm getting really tired of coaches and people that have been power brokers saying we have to fix the game. I don't think you need to fix anything. I think the game's fixing itself by the players winning in court and getting the rights they should have had for the last 50, 60, 70, 100 years. I think this is leveling the playing field. Yeah, college football has never been fair. It's always been dominated by a few programs at any given time, whether it's Notre Dame, Alabama, Miami, Michigan. It's always been that. And we're seeing those teams lose to the Vanderbilts. We're seeing Indiana rise. Sorry, Tom's not here, but Indiana's on the rise. And the transfer portal and NIL money is allowing that to happen. Because before, what was your benefit to going to Indiana if you were a 4-star, not happy sitting the bench at Alabama? You just wait it out. Your team's going to win a championship. You wait it out. Now you can go start. You can get NIL money that's that of a starter, and we're seeing some of that talent spread out. I want guys. I saw a rant. Our boss Steve Moore sent this link of Mike Gundy trying to talk about how they need to control this and get a commissioner and have. No, you don't. You know what you need to do? Get out of the way. Get out of the way. Everybody that's been in charge all this time. Get out of the way, because whatever exists now is your fault.
Yeah.
These coaches have had decades to see the right way, and not one of those guys has ever spoken up for their players to get paid. Not one time. All they do is whine because their jobs get harder because they have to re-recruit and keep their own guys happy. Too bad. Too bad. The game is great right now, and I think it's great right now because of these changes.
And let me throw one thing in there. And anybody who's followed me or whatever knows that I'm a Navy football fan because I grew up right by Annapolis and had a great girlfriend, great girlfriend in high school her father was an admiral at the academy, things like that,
Don't mess
but
that
no,
up.
but I'm a fan of service academy football because I love Army football except one day a year where they play Navy. But if the sport is like hopelessly broken or whatever it is, all these magpies keep saying, why are Army and Navy in the top 25? And why are they, there's a good chance they're going to play for the American Conference in the championship game and then have a rematch the next week in the scheduled Army Navy game. Yeah. But and listen, man, I'm not saying that they're Georgia. I'm not delusional, but they're really good teams. They're really good teams. So if everything's you can't fix this. It's irretrievably broken. No, it's not. And, you got two service academy teams in there. And by the way, they don't even have the advantage of NIL money or transfer portal stuff, but they're also in better position to get players because it's hard to explain. Players are running all over the place. It might give kids that are thinking about The service academy, they might think about, well, no one offered me anything. It's not like I got an offer to play at a Big Ten school. Yeah, I'm gonna go to Navy. I'm gonna go to Army. I'm gonna go to Air Force.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the cool things about this season too. And granted, I'm a little bit of a fanboy when it comes to service academy football, but those teams are really, really good.
Yeah,
I spent 7 years working at the Air Force Academy doing athletic stuff for
yeah.
them. So I remember at one point the wrestling coach at Air Force said, "We should always be one of the top teams in the nation because we can offer kids things that other schools can't. You're going to walk out of here with basically a 6-figure salary and the second lieutenant status and everything."
Yeah.
It's a little bit different when we're talking about football and basketball, but yeah, we see service academies have success all the time, and there's certainly something that they can do that other programs can't do, and
Yeah.
it's fun to be able to see.
I guess my bigger thing is stop listening to the people that did things that got us to this point.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nobody had any foresight. Nobody was looking out for the players. It was always about guys maintaining control. Coaches are control freaks. Athletic directors are control freaks. Commissioners are control freaks. You know what? They lost a little control, so they're unhappy. Too bad. It's good for the rest of us.
That's Kevin Wheeler. That's Bernie Miklasz, fellas. We have run out of time for today. We could go on probably forever and ever and ever, but this has been a fantastic conversation. I can't wait to do it again.
I always enjoy this, and thanks for having us, getting us all together again, and hopefully we'll do this. I know the plan is to do it at least once a week. I'm up for doing more of these a week, so yeah, very happy.
All right,
Very
let's
good.
go.
Awesome. You've been listening to and watching a KMOX Sports Roundtable. Thanks for joining us.